My first games, I learned most of everything what I did by looking at the Activision cartridges because I was done by the masters there, particularly Dave Crane, who I think had most of the innovative breakthroughs on those things. I was like trying to figure out their kernels, and it was just like very complicated. It's like branching all over the place, and so I came up with my own version, which allowed you to do graphics changes on every line, and also color changes on every line, and allows you to have more sprites. The Activision guys had the restriction of you can't have sprites, no flicker essentially. And my games, I said, well, I'll allow flicker, but maybe only like just what they call the 30 hertz flicker, as opposed to some games which could have the 20 hertz flicker and the 15 hertz flicker. And like, I don't know if you've seen the adventure game, which had, you get a lot of flicker on that game. 30 hertz flicker means that on every other frame, you get twice as many sprites from one sprite, because all you had in the 2600 was 2 sprites. And so to get like 8 guys on a screen, you can either have, flicker or 1 guy every 4 frames or something, 15 hertz flicker, or you can keep them vertically separated so that you have 2 guys, and then you change all their graphics and horizontal positions and everything, and then you have 2 more guys, and you change everything, and then you have 2 more guys, and so forth as you're going down the screen. And that's what my games do. But every once in a while, you'll allow the guys to have like 3 guys in a row, and then you get a little bit of flicker. But then hopefully they'll stop crossing, and then the flicker will go away. Ooh, I've lost my touch on this thing. You know, after like 83 or something, it's the post-crash after that point. Then Fox closed up their doors, and it's like, well, now what do I do? Well, the IBM PC came out, and I bought one of those, and so I had a plug-in card. It's actually a PC board that I designed, and it has on it a 6502 and some RAM for a trace buffer, and a 6532, which is the PIA chip. What you did was you unplugged the ROM port and then plugged this thing in instead, so it like kind of plugged in the cartridge port. And that development system was a pretty nice one because it's on a PC. And I also had hardware breakpoints and a trace buffer, so very easy for finding real-time code bugs, and that was a real pleasure to work with. Without those hardware breakpoints or a logic analyzer or something, you could spend weeks, months trying to track down some bug. And I actually had to, I think one bug cost me like 4 weeks at one time trying to track down. But with a nice system, it's like press a button, bang, the bug pops right up. You know, I was working on this idea for a game, which is Solaris. Finally ended up Solaris. I think I called it Star Game or something. That was my working title. It was just, but anyway, I was just working on that on my own for about a year, and then I tried to go out and sell it. And you know, it was not in this final form that we see here, but I was trying to take it to, I think, like, gosh, I tried iMagic, and I think Atari, and a couple other places. In fact, I was dealing with Atari finally, and they were going to title it. I don't remember if you remember the movie Last Starfighter, which is a movie that came back out in '84 or something like that. This was going to be Last Starfighter, and they had actually flown me down to the Warner Studios, and we saw a preview of Last Starfighter. I don't know why. It was just like, well, fly them down there, and so we saw Last Starfighter, and that was like on a Friday. Well, over the weekend, Jack Tramiel bought the company and laid off everybody. So the whole game thing was put on limbo, and at that point I thought, well, you know, I can't sell this game. I'd better go get a job. So I went and got a job at a company called Imagen, which did image processing for laser printers and so forth. And then kind of out of the blue, in I think mid '86, early '86, I got a call from Atari. They want to get back into 2600 video games. So they knew I had this game sitting around, and now they're interested in buying it. And at that point, I had a few more ideas about some things I wanted to add to the game, so I spent about 3 more months. So all total, it took about 1.5 years to get the game out. And I think I added you know how there's like 16 levels of charts in the game or something? I think that's what I added, was more chart levels and more the various concepts of going out the doors and going up the levels, and that wasn't in the earlier version. So it's probably worthwhile that it took a while to add that in. I think it helped the game. The explosions, I was trying to get the Star Raiders effect of like the little pieces blowing out, but I don't think I ever really got that down right on this one. Probably the reason I'm doing 3D games is probably those are the only ones that I think I enjoyed doing those more than the other kinds, and is more of a challenge. And not a lot of people were doing 3D games, so it's kind of like that's my little niche that I'm kind of good at. There's still a small aftermarket for these games. They still demand people have, there's like, actually there was more 2600s out there than there were Nintendos, except that these roll in the closet, and then Nintendos are the ones that were playing. But, in certain countries, this was still fairly new, and they didn't have Nintendos there yet, so there was a demand for cartridges there. And even in the U.S., there's still, if you're like one programmer and you have 100% of the U.S. market, and even though that could be a very small market, you still sell a lot of cartridges. And so for me, it worked out very well, because everybody else had either gotten out of the business or moved on to like PC games or Nintendo games, or I don't think Sega was out there. Sega might have just been starting. But it was me and maybe a few other guys had pretty much the whole 2600 market in the aftermarket. Here's the second to the last game I did, which is Super Football. On the title screen, it's all multicolored, and originally it didn't even have a title screen, but then they said, we want a title screen with a football player or something. So fine, there it is. And it's, I think it's all done with sprites. Yeah, it's that 6-digit score kernel, but not quite, because with the true Dave Crane 6-digit score kernel, you can't have multicolors, so I probably hacked something there in order to get the colors out of the thing. The reason why we put the 3D perspective in here is to, I think, avoid all the flicker that you in the original football game, because I think it was like a top-down view, and there was a case where these guys could all cross, but with the 3D, you have littler guys, so there's less chance of crossing. So I think that's why it was a 3D perspective. Also, I think I just liked the 3D perspective as opposed to like a top-down or a side view. Now, side view, I think like the old Mattel and Television, which was kind of out at the same time, that one was from the side, and there'd be too many sprites crossing. So it was either a top-down view or this 3D perspective view. While they're moving, they flicker, and then once they get into that position where they're in the right 3-player mode, that replication mode, then I probably turn on the switch that says, okay, now let's do 3 players that all look the same, and then it's probably only 1 sprite now, as opposed to there was like 3 sprites flickering. That's probably what I did. There's a little chunk of AI in there. It's not a lot. Didn't seem to really need a lot of AI for the game, but it was kind of fun to play around with. It was like, sometimes you get like a table has a bug in it, and one of these little guys, instead of running in, will suddenly just decide to run off into the corner or something, for who knows why he wanted to do that, but you go work around, and all of a sudden he does the right thing. But this is about as much as you can do on a 2600. This is Radar Lock. This is the last game I did for Atari, and this came about by them saying, well, we need a flying game, and I didn't ask them why they wanted a flying game, but they wanted one. And I think they wanted something that looked like Top Gun, where the guy's flying upside down, and here's the Russian, and here's the pilot flying, and it's like, they wanted that 3D view of that, and it's like, well, this is a 2600. I have 2 little sprites, and I can't do that. I'm sorry. It's like, you're going to have this. And actually, I showed them another game that was similar to this with the little horizon flying like that, and it's like, oh, okay, if this is all we get, we'll take it. So I didn't spend a lot of time on this one. I mean, like Solaris was like a year and a half, and this one was like 4 months or something. So the more time you spend on these games, the more polished they get. Borrowed a lot of stuff off of Solaris. This little ship graphic looks a lot like Solaris, little ship, and kind of the little Activision stuff. And I'm not sure whether this is the exact same mountains from Solaris or not, or whether I changed it a little bit. I don't recall. I think this might be similar to Solaris. You go in and you take that little kernel, video kernel we call them, and you go in and you'd hack it a little bit to make it fit for this game, but this little piece can get reused. The new thing I think was adding the missiles with the lock-on and kind of the neat part of the little, if it's not locked on, and it looks like Top Gun with a little missile kind of flies off into the distance, which is kind of a nice touch. Like in a game like Radar Lock, which is like one of my later games, you have the playfield, which is the resolution on that was every 4 clocks, so it's like very jaggy. If you want to have like a diagonal like that, it's very jaggy. So what you can do is they have something called the ball, or I think in my terminology they called it Missile 2, which just happened to have the same color always as the playfield. So you can use that to fill in the little gaps to give it a smooth line. So that's how you can get a 45 degree diagonal that looks smooth. And it's a trick. You fill it in with the little ball, and the hardware allows you to automatically, on every line, it will automatically move the ball by a certain amount on each horizontal line. So you only tell the ball at the top, okay, here's where you start, and I'm going to say on every line you can move 2 pixels to the right. And so it'll just automatically fill in that jaggy line for you. So it's a trick, and a very easy trick to put in. On the clouds, those are like sprites, and they have the sprite registers in there have these sizes where they can get larger and smaller. So as it gets closer, they get larger. And the reason why there's this delay, like the horizon moves and like the cloud moves a little bit later, I think it was probably just like a kludge in the code that I don't update each guy every frame. It's like this thing's like maybe getting updated all the time, but the clouds and all the other sprites, their graphics, there's going to be a slight delay because I don't have enough time to do all these guys on one field. So it's like this guy gets done maybe like 3 or 4 fields later, and so then it's like the horizon's already moved like that, and then this guy changes. But I probably should have had some like prioritizing. It's like, oh, the horizon just moved, so I gotta go do all the clouds because it looks kind of clunky. And pretty much for me, I got into the games by accident. I'm primarily a hardware designer, VLSI design, systems design, that kind of stuff. And the games were always like kind of almost like a hobby, except for the few years when I was working pretty seriously with Fox. I was doing games mainly as a part-time thing. It was like doing PokeChip or working as a systems designer at QMS and doing the games on the side, kind of like a hobby. You had full capability at any time that the processor could get in and go change colors and move sprites and playfield around. So it was very flexible, which gave it a very long lifetime, as you can see.
I got a Gremlin with mag wheels, baby. It's the bitchin'est car with a couple of bucks for gas. We could go real far. Come cruising with me, honey, forever would be nice. I got fun fur on the dashboard and some fuzzy dice. I got a Gremlin with mag wheels, baby.